Alright, Richie here with Statifying Football. These are your noon games for the Saturday one. I'm breaking it up this year. This one's only noon one, so it'll be a little bit shorter. The first game at noon, Arkansas State taking on Georgia. Arkansas State last week, they beat UNLV 43-17. Quarterback Logan Monner passed for 284, 2 touchdowns, ran for 1. Running back Ryan Graham ran for 103 yards and a touchdown. Wide receiver Omar Bayless had 6 catches, 149 and a touchdown. They ran for 214 and team as a team. They had 498 total yards. Their defense had 6 sacks in the game and a pick 6. They have an offense that could scare anybody, but they're taking on number 3 Georgia. And Georgia killed Murray State 63-17. They had 268 rushing yards. Their defense had 6 sacks and a fumble return touchdown. Arkansas State's a pretty good Sun Belt team. I don't see this one being close with Georgia. Next game, Ohio State and Indiana. Ohio State, they shut out Cincinnati 42-0. Quarterback Justin Fields, he's in the Heisman race in my mind. He was 20 of 25, 224, 2 touchdowns, plus 42 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Running back J.K. Dobbins ran for 141 and 2 touchdowns. They had 508 total yards. Their defense had 5 sacks. And then facing an Indiana team who was also 2-0. They beat Eastern Illinois 52-0. They had 555 total yards. Their defense only allowed 116 total yards. Quarterback Michael Penix, they played both their quarterbacks, Michael Penix Jr. and Peyton Ramsey. Michael Penix Jr. was 14 of 20, 197, 2 touchdowns. Peyton Ramsey was 13 of 14 for 226 and 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver Donovan Hale, 5 catches, 110 and 1 touchdown. Maybe could go back and forth a little bit early, but I still see Ohio State getting this one. The next game is Pitt and Penn State. Pitt is not that good. They beat a good MAC Ohio team 20-10. Quarterback Kenny Pickett was 26 of 37, 321 and a touchdown. Wide receiver Maurice French, 10 catches, 138 and a touchdown. Their defense had 6 sacks and only allowed 35 rushing yards, which is pretty good. But and they're taking on their in-state rival Penn State, who beat Buffalo 45-13, but they were down 10-7 at halftime. They came back. Quarterback Sean Clifford was 16 of 22, 279, 4 touchdowns, plus added 51 rushing. Wide receiver Jahan Dawson, 4 catches, 109, 2 touchdowns. They only had 78 rushing yards. The defense did have a pick 6. This could be kind of close for a little bit. Pitt has a decent defense, but I go with Penn State in the end here. Miami of Ohio taking on Cincinnati. Cincinnati, I talked a few minutes ago, they were shut out by Ohio State. They only had 107 rushing yards. Their defense allowed 508 yards. They allowed 5 sacks. They really had nothing going for them in that game. And they're taking on Miami of Ohio, who had a pretty good game this week. They beat Tennessee Tech 48-17. They had 190 rushing yards, 31 points in the second quarter alone. Their defense had 2 interceptions. They had a pick 6. It could be interesting for a while, but I think Cincinnati is going to bounce back. They're a pretty good team, and I see them taking this one. Tennessee, man, they lost their last game to BYU in overtime, 29-26. They're 0-2 for the first time since 1988. But they're taking on 1AA Chattanooga here. Their defense did have 4 sacks. Running back Ty Chandler ran for 154 yards. They ran for 242 as a team against BYU in the loss. But they should bounce back here with a win against Chattanooga. A really interesting non-conference noon game here. Kansas State from the Big 12 taking on the SEC's Mississippi State. Kansas State, they beat Bowling Green 52-0. Bowling Green looked good their first week, so to get a shutout against anybody, especially nowadays, is a pretty big deal. Kansas State also had over 500 yards of offense, and they've done it in consecutive games for the first time in their history, in school history. They had over 500 total yards of offense in 2 straight games. Ball State running back transfer James Gilbert ran for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. They ran for 333, had 521 total. The defense only allowed 140 total. Mississippi State had a pretty good game against Southern Miss. They won 38-15. They had 210 rushing yards, but their quarterback Tommy Stevens, he was injured. He's day-to-day. Their defense has forced a turnover in 18 straight games. They forced 3 against Southern Miss. And their running back Kylan Hill ran for 123 and a touchdown. With Mississippi State, I was kind of leaning towards Kansas State anyway, and Mississippi State's quarterback is day-to-day. I think Kansas State might actually take this one here. All right, next game, 1AA Furman taking on Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech bounced back from losing the first game and from losing to Old Dominion last year with the win against Old Dominion this past week, 31-17. Quarterback Ryan Willis was 16-28, 272, 2 touchdowns, plus 34 rushing yards and a touchdown. Their defense did allow 202 rushing yards, which is not good, but they had 5 sacks, and I think they continue winning with this one here. Another interesting non-conference game, NC State taking on West Virginia. NC State, they beat 1AA Western Carolina 41-0. They had 309 rushing yards. Running back Zonovan Knight had 119 yards and 2 touchdowns. They had 540 total yards. Their defense had 3 sacks. They allowed only 98 passing yards and 8 rushing yards, so they only allowed 106 total yards. They're taking on a West Virginia team that kind of took it on the chin against Missouri. They lost 38-7. Their quarterback Austin Kendall was 15-25 for only 137 yards, 1 touchdown. He threw 2 interceptions. They only had 171 total yards, only 30 rushing yards, and their defense did allow 232 rushing yards to Missouri. Talent-wise, these teams are about even, and maybe West Virginia can. And it's at West Virginia, so it might bode well for them. But I kind of see NC State taking this one. But that's an interesting one to keep an eye on for the first half. All right, then you got Eastern Michigan taking on Illinois. Eastern Michigan, they lost to Kentucky 38-17. Although quarterback Mike Glass did have a really good game. 34-53, 337, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, plus 35 rushing yards. They only had 49 rushing yards as a team, and they lost that one. And Illinois, they had another win. They're 2-0 right now. They beat UConn 31-23. They were down 13-0 and came back to win. Quarterback Brandon Peters has had a really good first 2 games. He was 24-35, 227, 4 touchdowns and a pick. Their defense did have 5 sacks and only allowed 10 rushing yards. And their defensive end, Olawale Bedekis, had 3.5 sacks. I think Illinois should move to 3-0 with this one. Maryland taking on Temple. Maryland has come out guns blazing under new coach Mike Locksley, and Virginia Tech transfer Josh Jackson. The first week they put up 79, and last week against a ranked Syracuse team that I think shouldn't have been ranked, and I said that before the season. And they killed them 63-20. Quarterback Josh Jackson was 21-38, 296, 3 touchdowns and a pick. They had 650 total yards of offense. Running back Javon Lee ran for 107 and 2 touchdowns. They ran for 354 as a team, and their defense did have 4 sacks. They're taking on Temple team who had a bye week. In their first week, they beat Bucknell, took care of business 56-12. Quarterback Anthony Russo did pass for 409, 4 touchdowns and a pick in that game. They had 2 wide receivers go over 100 yards in that game. Brandon Mack, 9 receptions, 130 yards. Jaden Blue, 10 receptions, 117 yards and a touchdown. And they 10 receptions, 117 yards and a touchdown. And 695 yards of offense in that game. So maybe their offense is decent. Maybe they can keep up at Maryland the way that Maryland's looked. That'll be interesting. Another really interesting non-conference game to keep an eye on, but Maryland's been rolling, so I'll go with Maryland here, but, potential upset there. All right, next game, 1AA taking on the Citadel, or the Citadel taking on Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech had a real low-scoring game against USF. They only beat them 14-10. They did have 181 rushing yards. Their defense had 4 sacks, only allowed 93 rushing yards. USF has been terrible this year, or through the first 2 games. Then Georgia Tech did not look a whole lot better, but I think they keep their win going with this one against the Citadel. All right, in-state rivalry here. Air Force taking on Colorado. Air Force, they had a bye, but 2 weeks ago they beat Colgate 48-7. They have a triple option. They ran for 423 yards in that game. Taking on Colorado, who had they're 2-0. They were down 17-0 to Nebraska, and they came back to win in overtime 34-31 against Nebraska. They had a 96-yard touchdown pass, longest touchdown in school history at Colorado. Quarterback Steven Montez was 28-41, 375, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Wide receiver Katie Nixon had 6 catches, 148 and a touchdown. Their defense did have 6 sacks. This is a really interesting game to me. Air Force is usually a tough team. The military academies are always tough. This is a triple option. They can run the ball. Colorado better be prepared for this game. There could be a bit of an upset here, but I'll give the edge to Colorado. But that's that's one to keep an eye on for sure. All right, Florida Atlantic taking on Ball State. Florida Atlantic, what a tough first two games. Ohio State and then UCF, right? They lost 48-14 to UCF. Their defense allowed 574 yards, and that was in a game that was called with 4 minutes and 20 seconds left because of lightning. The game was called. Quarterback Robinson was only 18-40. They got sacked 5 times. Taking on a Ball State team who they're 1-1. They had a good game against one Fordham. They had an okay game. They put up 57 points, but they did allow 29. Quarterback Drew Plitt, though, was 32 of 40, 439 yards, 6 touchdown passes to 1 interception. The 6 touchdown passes ties a school record for Ball State. Wide receiver Riley Miller had 6 receptions, 116 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Their defense did have 2 interceptions, and they recorded a safety in the game. Florida Atlantic, they were able to move the ball decently against UCF for a little while there. I trust Lane Kiffin and his offense. I think they can move it, but if Drew Plitt for Ball State's passing it around like this, this could be a potential shootout. I want to go Florida Atlantic because I live here. I'll go Florida Atlantic. If they lose this, it might be the last time I pick them this season. All right, Norfolk State taking on Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina had a good win. They beat a bad Big 12 team in Kansas, but they did beat them 12-7. Running back C.J. Marable ran for 148 yards and a touchdown. They ran for 172 as a team. Their defense had 2 interceptions, and I think they keep it going here with the win against Norfolk State. Then you got New Mexico Lobos taking on Notre Dame. New Mexico, both teams had byes this past weekend. Both teams. So New Mexico is taking on Notre Dame. Both teams had byes this past weekend. New Mexico, they beat Sam Houston State 39-31 a couple weeks ago. Their running back Amar Davis ran for 107 and 2 touchdowns. They had 145 rushing yards. The defense did have 3 sacks. But Notre Dame also had a bye. They beat Louisville a couple weeks ago 35-17. Their running back Tony Jones Jr. ran for 110 and a touchdown. Ian Book was 14 of 23, 193, 1 touchdown, plus 81 rushing yards and a touchdown. Their defense had 4 sacks. New Mexico's offense is decent. Notre Dame did not look very good against Louisville. Louisville has improved. This could be interesting, but I think Notre Dame should take it. And then the final game from the noon slot here is the MAC game. Akron taking on Central Michigan. Akron, they did lose to UAB 31-20. Quarterback Cato Nelson had a decent game, 25 of 44, 359, 2 touchdowns, plus 31 rushing. They only had 29 rushing yards as a team, though. Wide receiver Dustin Burkhart had 8 catches for 217. Their defense only allowed 83 rushing yards, to UAB. They're taking on Central Michigan, who got slaughtered by Wisconsin 61-0. They only had 58 yards of offense. They had 3 quarterbacks play combined 9 of 24. I do think this game will be pretty even. I'm actually sort of leaning towards Central Michigan here, just because Akron's first game they didn't look particularly good here, but I'm not sure which way to go with this one. You know what? I'll go with Central Michigan here. So those are noon games. Check back in for our other games, 3:30 games, and all that other stuff. Subscribe, like our channel, comment, everything.